Well, if the polls are to be believed, the Gillard government is facing electoral wipeout. One of the ways it's trying to avoid that is by getting more voters onto the electoral roll. At the last election, 1.5 million eligible voters slipped through the net, and a lot of those may have been Labor supporters. Tonight, the Senate is expected to pass legislation aiming to marshal those votes, a move the coalition claims is a rort. Heather Hewitt reports.
What I want to know from you is what you think accounts for some of the difficulties that the government has encountered in recent years.
Minority government has provided plenty of good fodder for university tutorials in recent months, and this class of first-year political students at Monash Uni is no exception.
Minority government's good or bad?
I think that minority government's good in the way that it helps debate policies to bring out the best possible outcome, not necessarily for what a particular party believes, but the best outcome.
I want to vote Labor, but I don't know, they're just too much. There's too much hassle, yeah.
He's not alone there. All of these students are entitled to vote, but their age group, 18 to 25-year-olds, makes up the largest proportion of 1.5 million eligible Australians who are not on the electoral roll.
And that's not good enough. Our roll needs to reflect eligible Australians and those people who have a right to vote. 1.5 million unenrolled Australians is a blight on our electoral roll and the integrity of our system.
Put simply, if the bulk of those eligible voters were on the roll at the last election and followed the established trend of 2/3 of young people voting for the ALP or the Greens, it might have changed the result in Labor's favour.
It's massive. That's roughly 10,000 voters per federal division. When you contemplate that in the context of the last election and a hung parliament, 10,000 unenrolled voters in every electorate, on average, is a real failure of our enrolment system.
I would hazard a guess that certainly it would have changed results in Labor's favour at the last election in maybe 3 or 4 seats. Now, of course, given what we know about the last election, that was crucial. I mean, it could mean that Labor was not a minority government.
I think that's a reasonable and plausible conclusion, since there were clearly many, many electors who didn't get to exercise their right.
Obviously, this is too close to call. Friends, as we know in our great democracy, every vote is important, every vote must be counted.
And as we all now know, the rest is history. Labor may well be ruining the day that it failed to act sooner on repeated recommendations from the Australian Electoral Commission and the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters to address the problem.
That finally happens later tonight, when the Senate is expected to pass legislation that, amongst other things, enables the Electoral Commission to automatically put young Australians onto the roll when they become eligible to vote. The opposition is against the government's changes and smells a rat.
They think that if they get more young people onto the roll, willy-nilly, that must improve their chances. And it seems to be some evidence that that's where the targeting is going on.
I don't think they benefit any partisan grouping. The people they benefit are those who are entitled to a vote, entitled to be enrolled, who currently don't get that right.
The Electoral Act says that it is the individual's responsibility to put themselves on the roll. It is a binding requirement of the Act.
But part of the problem is that many young people have mistakenly believed that because voting is compulsory, the government was putting them on the roll when they turned 18. A problem compounded in the 2 most populated states, New South Wales and Victoria, where young voters are automatically registered for state elections without having to fill out forms. It's known as Smart Roll, and they wrongly assumed this also enabled them to vote at federal elections.
I mean, it would be natural for them to think, oh, I'm enrolled. I can vote in both federal, state and local elections, where, of course, up until now, they can't.
It'll work in practice by harmonising the Commonwealth roll with the 2 most populous states, Victoria and New South Wales. And it'll create a system whereby a voter who's currently enrolled, who changes their address, can be tracked through conventional data matching techniques.
Of the 1.5 million Australians missing from the electoral roll, about 600,000 are estimated to have been removed because they changed addresses and failed to notify the Electoral Commission. Under existing law, they have to be struck off.
Now, the Commission knows where they've moved to. They know they've moved, otherwise they wouldn't have taken them off the roll. And they know this by getting data from what are known as, in the administration, trusted agencies like Road Traffic Authority, Centrelink. There's a whole host of them.
The new laws will allow the Electoral Commission to keep these people on the roll if they move house and forget to pass it on, saving them from turning up on election day to find they're no longer registered. This will be done by cross-checking their addresses with other government agencies like Centrelink, and the Commission says it will be a very thorough process. But the opposition is not so sure, worried about the chance of fraud.
The Electoral Commission has absolutely carte blanche to choose any list it wishes. There is no checks, no fetters, no nothing. And it's wrong. If you can't believe in the roll and its accuracy, then you've got enormous problems with regard to fraud.
I think the allegation of roll fraud, I think is a bit of a red herring. I think the Coalition has a genuine problem with this legislation, and that is that at the moment it is going to disadvantage them.
The government maintains this is not its rationale and that the legislation is long overdue. In any case, current opinion polls indicate it's not going to pull Labor across the line at the next election, though it may save it some seats.
Heather Ewart reporting.